Hi there, this is Neil Salvage, and welcome to this podcast, Gassing On. Yes, we're going to gas on about the world of ground gas. We're going to meet people in the industry. We're going to visit places and generally find out about interesting things that are happening, developing, and the changes that have gone on before us. So welcome on board and hope you enjoy this podcast. So in today's episode, I'm joined by John Naylor of Ground Gas Solutions. Welcome, John. How are you?
Hi, Neil.
How are you?
I'm doing very well. Actually, I'm in a nice hotel in London tonight.
Excellent. Well, I was going to ask where you are, but you beat me to it. So, no, thanks for joining us for this this podcast interview, discussion, and hopefully pick your brains and find out a bit more about John Naylor and your roles and jobs. So, John, how did it all start in the ground gas sector for you?
Good gosh. A little bit by accident, I suppose, Neil. I'm a geologist academically and wanted to actually go into the oil industry. Back in the day, but unfortunately, I think when I graduated, there wasn't really many jobs in the industry. It was a bit of a recession, so I had to reimagine what I wanted to do. So I ended up looking for jobs in the environmental sector in the UK, and bizarrely ended up actually as a construction quality assurance engineer on landfills.
Right.
And that's really where the journey to gas began, because as I was doing the quality assurance on the landfill sort of engineering, the clay mineral liners and plastic sheeting, which funnily enough has reappeared more recently in more stuff we do these days. It was actually a chap wandering around with a machine, and he was measuring gas from boreholes. So really, that's really where it started.
Excellent. Well, it's interesting there, John. You talk about in the environmental sector and going into the oil industry. What do you think if you had gone into the oil industry now with all the changes in the global economy for fossil fuels? Do you think it would be, do you think you'd be in a similar position? Where do you think you'd be now?
I have no idea, but I imagine, funnily enough, I do think I'd probably have ended up actually pioneering or trying to lead some environmental or more sustainable approaches to the oil industry.
Yeah. No,
so there'll be plenty of work for me in that industry. There still is.
Well, excellent. Well, one of the things I always look at is when I speak to, would you call yourself a consultant, John? Would that be the right term?
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Yeah, I often try and look at whether you work at the front end of the build or the construction process, or back end, or do you work both? Where do you think you sit in the construction phase?
All over it, Neil. So pretty much before a shovel goes into the ground, where we're looking for what the actual conceptual risks are from ground gas, through to the design of gas protection systems that could be required for any given building, to the end of actually putting those systems in, or rather I don't put those in, but I certainly verify that they've been put into the design, and then any aftercare. So receptor monitoring at the end of that, just to show that the hazardous gases are not entering those buildings, and it's design. The design is actually working as advertised. So yeah, all across it really.
Excellent, lovely. And one of the things that we look at is, where do you think the state of the construction industry is at the moment, and your role? Where do you think it lies at the moment? In a good position or otherwise?
Okay. In the UK at the moment, I think it's variable. I think it's a good word to use. There's a lot of regulation out there. There's a lot of building regulations to keep abreast of. There's a lot of guidance. There's a lot of legislation to follow, and it's all been written on the experience of decades, if not hundreds of years of construction industry. So we've got the history in this country to do it well. But what I do see is there does seem to be quite a disparity between quality in works, particularly in the building sector that I see on site, some excellent examples of good workmanship, nice, clean, tidy sites looked after by the site staff, site workers, and then others that are just, you do wonder, how these people have managed to win the work with the level of quality and effort they're putting in. So I think there's great stuff out there, but there's very poor out there, and I think that the bar really needs to be raised.
Good. Well, the other thing is looking at, if you've got a crystal ball there, John, looking into it now, where do you see the future is going, in raising that bar and getting the standards up? Do you think there's inroads, things happening at the moment to do that?
There is. There's plenty of things. I mean, industry will always try to better itself where it can. So the work that the British Standards Institute does, work that some of the other publications do in our sector to bring good practice to the industry. But I suppose more recently we've had the Grenfell Tower disaster tragedy, and that really has, for me, shook the industry as to what it needs to be thinking about long term. And as a result of that, there is likely to be a safety officer role that is generated from the findings of the public inquiry into that fire, and that will have ramifications for the entire construction industry in the UK. And they will really need to think about installing things safely, and particularly with things like ground gas protection. It's there as a safety feature, and therefore, if it's needed, it needs to go in. Then it needs to be done properly, and it needs to be looked after once it's been installed, so that follow-on trades, don't actually damage it.
It's interesting. It's interesting you say that, John, because I was doing a bit of reading a few weeks ago, and the biggest risk to mortgage lenders was actually from flooding, from subsidence, and from contaminated land. It was the third on their list. So,
wow.
Yeah. So,
well, there you go. Because contaminated land wasn't even on the radar before, certainly wasn't really before the 1980s.
And that was obviously the Losco and the Abisted incidents were the kind of key starting blocks for that, would you say, John?
I would say Losco was the starting block for contaminated land from a gas point of view. And that's really where a lot of the early guidance came from to look into ground gases. That's becoming more and more realised as time's gone along. We're starting to build on more and more brownfield land. We should be, it's more sustainable. We should use the brownfield land ahead of greenfield. Why not? But of course, that does require, as you said, the third on your list there was contaminated land. That requires developers to pay particular attention to what the historical legacy was, and make sure that they protect those sites as best they can for the future residents. What long since after the developers have gone.
Interesting. Good. Yeah. Well, John, we make these nice and short and snappy, so I don't want to keep you too much longer, and I really appreciate you contributing. One last one for the road from me. Where's the best location that you've been to work and had the most interesting projects?
Oh, gosh. I would say I had a trip up to the Forth Road Bridge a good few years back there. Bit of an odd one, bit of a different one, but it's got an anchorage chamber on the south bank that goes into the oil shales.
Oh, right.
And yes, so it's somewhere where I would say not very many people have ever been in. So that was what was weird, and I just had no idea it was there. And to find that and to do some gas monitoring down there because of the oil shales and the potential linkage for gases to ingress into that confined space was really interesting and very different. And also just actually having to go then for an evening run with some of my colleagues over the bridge just to wrap up the day. Certainly some strong memories for me on that trip.
Excellent. Those jobs do hit home, don't they? And you always, every time you go up there, I'm sure you drive over it and think about that job, don't you? Yeah.
Well, the new bridge now, the third of Forth, I think as they call it now, is the one that we can drive over and look across at the road, the old road bridge, and yeah, some fond memories every time I go travel up to Scotland.
Brilliant. Well, John, thanks very much for your time, and by all means, anybody out there listening wants to get in contact. John, have you got some contact details for us where we can get a hold of you?
Yeah, sure. Probably the easiest way is to just Google or search for GGS, Ground Gas Solutions Limited. On Google, you'll soon find some contact details on there, or just send an email to info@ggs-uk.com and it'll find me.
Excellent. And the good one that comes up, we are on the A to Z, so we're March 2021 at the moment, and we are looking to be on the road with the A to Z in May, I believe, John. Yeah.
We very much hope so. Very much hope so. So we'll just have to hope that the efforts everybody's making to try and reduce the restrictions through keeping safe continues enough that we're allowed to operate those events safely again. But yeah, I'm very much looking forward to spreading the good word of ground gas going forwards.
Now that's brilliant, John. Thanks very much for your time, and we'll be back in a few weeks' time with another podcast, another guest coming on board. So thanks to John Naylor from Ground Gas Solutions. Really appreciate your input, John, and look forward to catching up. Maybe in Series 2 we'll come back and visit you again. So thanks for joining us, and look forward to seeing you again next time. Bye now.